The crystal champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of my parents' dining room, but the silence that followed was even more deafening. My brother Kingsley stood at the head of the table, his face twisted into that familiar smirk I'd grown to hate over the years. I'm Violet, and this is how my 30th birthday turned into the most humiliating night of my life. Let's talk about our family's greatest disappointment, shall we? Kingsley's voice carried across the room as he pulled out his phone. My dear sister, who chose to waste her time finger painting instead of pursuing a real career, has managed to rack up exactly $127,430 in student loans. My mother Andrea gasped, clutching her pearls. The dozen guests, all family friends and business associates, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Kingsley, stop this right now, I warned, my voice shaking. He continued, reading from his screen. And according to these credit reports I pulled, which, by the way, show an absolutely abysmal score, she's barely making minimum payments teaching art to kindergarteners. How did you even get access to that information? My best friend Flynn stood up, her face flushed with anger. Oh, please, I'm a financial advisor. I have my ways. Kingsley waved his hand dismissively. The point is, while I've been managing billion-dollar portfolios, my baby sister has been living in a fantasy world of paint and canvas. My mother finally spoke up, but not in my defense. Violet, darling, we've tried to tell you, art isn't a sustainable career path. The room started spinning. I'd spent years defending my choices, explaining that art therapy could be both fulfilling and profitable. But here I was, being dissected like a failed investment in front of everyone who mattered in our social circle. I need some air, I mumbled, pushing back my chair. Running away again? Kingsley called after me. Just like you ran away from that internship I arranged at my firm? I stopped at the doorway, turning to face him. You want to know why I rejected that internship, Kingsley? Because I refused to become another soulless number cruncher who measures human worth by their bank balance. At least I can pay my bills without borrowing money from Dad, he shot back. That's when Flynn grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the room. We ended up in the garden, where I finally let the tears fall. He had no right, Flynn said, pulling me into a hug. No right at all. The worst part is, he's not entirely wrong. I wiped my eyes, smearing expensive mascara across my face. I am drowning in debt. My apartment is barely bigger than a closet. And yes, I borrowed money from Dad last month to fix my car. Flynn grabbed my shoulders. Stop it. You're doing what you love. You're helping children express themselves through art. That's worth more than all of Kingsley's portfolios combined. Tell that to my credit score. I laughed bitterly. We heard footsteps approaching. It was Catherine, my former art professor, who'd become a mentor and friend. She'd been invited because she'd known our family for years. I wasn't going to say anything in there, Catherine said, sitting beside me on the garden bench. But I have a proposition for you. I looked up at her, mascara-stained face and all. I've been watching you teach those kids, Violet. You have a gift, not just for art, but for healing through art. Have you ever considered starting your own art therapy practice? With what money? I scoffed. There are grants available. I have connections with several galleries that support therapeutic arts programs. And more importantly, she paused, making sure I was listening, there's a huge market for women's art therapy. I've seen how you connect with people, how you help them open up through creativity. For the first time that evening, I felt a spark of something other than shame. You really think I could do that? I know you can. Catherine's voice was firm. And wouldn't that be the best revenge? Building something meaningful while Kingsley pushes papers around? I stood up, straightening my dress. Through the window, I could see Kingsley holding court in the dining room, probably still discussing my failures. You know what? I'm done letting him define my worth. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I'm going to build something he can't dismiss with a credit report. Flynn squeezed my hand. Now that's the Violet I know. As we walked back toward the house, I felt something shift inside me. Kingsley had tried to shame me with numbers, but he'd forgotten one crucial calculation: the value of passion multiplied by determination. I was about to show him just how bad he was at math. 3 months after my disastrous birthday party, I stood in an empty storefront, paint swatches scattered across the floor like fallen autumn leaves. Flynn circled the space, taking measurements while I tried to envision where everything would go. "The natural light in here is perfect," I said, gesturing to the large windows. "We could set up easels along this wall and maybe create a cozy corner for one-on-one sessions over there." "And you're sure about this location?" Flynn asked, tapping her pen against her clipboard. "It's not exactly the fancy part of town your family's used to." "That's exactly why it's perfect. Real people, real struggles, real healing." I picked up a paint swatch in sage green. "Besides, the rent is actually manageable with the small business loan Catherine helped me secure." My phone buzzed. Mother's name flashed across the screen. I took a deep breath before answering. "Violet, darling, please tell me you're not serious about this therapy studio nonsense," she said without preamble. "Your father and I were talking, and we think—" "Mom, I've already signed the lease." Silence crackled over the line. "Does your brother know about this? Perhaps you should consult with him about the financial implications before—" "I'm not consulting Kingsley about anything," I cut her off. "Not after what he did." "Oh, sweetheart, he was just concerned about your future. Speaking of which, he's having a dinner party next weekend. Important people will be there. Maybe you could network, find a more suitable career path?" I caught Flynn's eye and mouthed, "Help me," as my mother continued listing all the banking executives who would be attending. "Mom, I have to go. My business advisor is here." I hung up before she could respond, slumping against the wall. "Business advisor?" Flynn raised an eyebrow. "Well, you are helping me measure things very professionally." We both laughed, but it was cut short by a knock on the storefront window. A woman about my age stood there, peering in curiously. I waved her inside. "Hi, I'm Elizabeth," she said, glancing around. "I saw your sign about art therapy sessions. Are you open yet?" "We're actually opening next month, but—" "I need this," she interrupted, wringing her hands. "I've been going through a divorce, and traditional therapy isn't helping. When I saw your flyer about healing through art, something just clicked." I exchanged looks with Flynn. We hadn't even finished painting the walls, and already we had our first potential client. "Why don't we sit down and talk?" I pulled up 2 folding chairs. "Tell me what draws you to art therapy." As Elizabeth spoke about her struggles with expression and self-worth, I found myself pulling out my sketchbook, starting to draw. She watched, fascinated, as I sketched her story in abstract shapes and colors. "That's exactly how it feels," she whispered, pointing to the dark swirls I'd drawn, "like I'm being pulled under." "Art gives us a language when words fail," I explained, adding lighter colors to the edges of the sketch. "Sometimes we need to see our pain to understand it. And then," I handed her a pencil, "we can start to transform it." Elizabeth's hand trembled as she took the pencil, but soon she was adding her own marks to the drawing. Flynn quietly excused herself, leaving us to this unexpected first session. Later that evening, as Flynn and I celebrated with takeout on the floor of my future studio, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Catherine. "Violet, I just got off the phone with a contact at the Women's Empowerment Foundation. They're interested in funding a pilot program for domestic violence survivors, art therapy-based healing. You interested?" My heart raced. That's huge, Catherine. "It would mean expanding faster than planned, taking risks. You up for that?" I looked around the empty studio, remembering Elizabeth's transformation during our impromptu session. "Yes, absolutely yes." After hanging up, Flynn raised her wine glass. "To taking risks?" "To proving them wrong," I corrected, clinking my glass against hers. That night, as I updated my business plan, I received a text from Kingsley. "Heard about your little therapy project. Hope you factored in the failure rate of new businesses. Wouldn't want to add to those loans." I started typing an angry response, then deleted it. Instead, I sent him the photo I'd taken of Elizabeth's finished artwork, adding only, "This is what success looks like to me." Then I blocked his number and turned back to my plans. Let him think what he wanted. I had a business to build and women to help. For the first time since that horrible birthday party, I felt truly powerful. Not because I was proving him wrong, but because I was finally completely right. 6 months into running my art therapy studio, I sat across from Catherine in my office, spreadsheets scattered between us like a paper battlefield. The morning sun cast long shadows across the financial reports I'd been avoiding. "You're burning through your startup funds faster than anticipated," Catherine said, tapping a particularly scary-looking number. "The renovation costs alone." I know, I know. I rubbed my temples. "But you should see how the women respond to the space. Elizabeth says it feels like a sanctuary. A sanctuary that needs to pay its bills." Catherine's voice was gentle but firm. "You're doing amazing work, Violet, but you need to think bigger." A knock interrupted us. Flynn poked her head in, excitement written across her face. "You need to see this." She thrust her phone at me. On the screen was a business news article. "Campbell Financial under investigation. Sources report irregularities in client accounts." "Isn't that Kingsley's firm?" Flynn asked. Before I could respond, my office phone rang. Elizabeth's name flashed on the caller ID. "I'm sorry, I have to take this," I said, answering the call. "Elizabeth? Is everything okay?" "Better than okay," she replied, her voice trembling with joy. "I got the gallery showing. They want to feature the pieces I created in our sessions." I felt tears welling up. Elizabeth had started as my first client and become one of our biggest success stories. "That's incredible. When?" "Next month. And I want to donate half the proceeds to your scholarship fund to help other women access art therapy." After finishing the call, I looked up to find Catherine studying me intently. "What?" I asked. "That's it," she said, straightening up. "That's how we solve the funding issue. Success stories, real results. Have you considered approaching corporate wellness programs?" "You mean like the ones that pay actual money?" Flynn interjected, still scrolling through the article about Kingsley's firm. "Speaking of which, your brother might need some therapy soon." I waved her off. "Focus. Catherine, what exactly are you suggesting?" "I have a contact, Caden. He specializes in connecting wellness programs with corporate clients. One contract with a major company could fund your scholarship program for a year." As if on cue, my mother's number appeared on my phone. I let it go to voicemail. "Violet," Catherine continued, "you've created something special here, but being good at helping people isn't enough. You need to be smart about the business side, too." "That's what Kingsley always said I couldn't do," I muttered. "Well, Kingsley's company is being investigated for financial misconduct, so maybe his business advice isn't worth much," Flynn said, finally putting her phone down. The next day, I met Caden at a local coffee shop. He wasn't what I expected, no sleek suit or corporate demeanor. Instead, he wore a casual blazer and had kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. "Catherine told me about your program," he said, reviewing my portfolio. "Particularly interested in the work you're doing with trauma survivors." "We focus on healing through creative expression," I explained, pulling out before and after photos of client artwork. "See how the colors change? The lines become more confident?" "Numbers and data points matter to corporate clients," Caden said, "but this tells a story they can connect with." He paused, studying one particular piece. "My sister went through something similar. Art saved her too." By the time we finished our coffee, Caden had outlined a plan to present my program to 3 major companies. As we stood to leave, he hesitated. "There's something else you should know," he said. "I used to work with your brother." My stomach dropped. "Oh? Let's just say I left Campbell Financial for ethical reasons. What you're doing here, it's the opposite of everything that firm stands for, and that's a compliment." That evening, I finally listened to my mother's voicemail. Her voice was tight with anxiety. "Violet, darling, there are some terrible rumors about your brother's firm. He's not taking calls, but I thought, well, you work with people in crisis now, don't you? Perhaps you could reach out?" I deleted the message and opened my laptop, pulling up the business plan Catherine and I had worked on. Next to it, I placed a photo of Elizabeth standing proudly beside her artwork. My phone buzzed with a text from Caden. "First corporate presentation scheduled for next week. Ready to show them what real value looks like?" I smiled, thinking about Kingsley's words at my birthday party. He'd tried to shame me with numbers, but I was building something he couldn't quantify, hope, healing, transformation. And unlike his firm's accounts, my books were clean, my conscience clear, and my purpose pure. Ready, I texted back, then added another message. Let's make it count. And that's why art therapy isn't just about healing. It's about transformation, I concluded, clicking to the final slide of my presentation. The conference room at Meridian Industries fell silent. The CEO leaned forward. Ms. Campbell, these results are remarkable. 70% reduction in stress-related sick days, 85% participant retention rate, Caden added from beside me, the highest of any wellness program we've reviewed. One of the board members raised her hand. The article in Women's Health magazine mentioned your work with trauma survivors. How would that translate to a corporate environment? Stress is stress, I explained, pulling up Elizabeth's before and after artwork. Whether it's from domestic violence or workplace burnout, art gives people a safe way to process their emotions. 2 hours later, I walked out with a signed contract for a corporate-wide wellness program. Caden waited until we were in the elevator before breaking into a grin. 3 major contracts in 2 months. You're on fire, Violet. My phone buzzed. Another news alert about Campbell Financial. I switched it off. Speaking of fire, Caden said carefully, your brother's firm is not my problem. I straightened my blazer. I have a studio to run. Back at the studio, Flynn was leading a group session in our main space. Through the window, I watched as women of all ages worked at their easels, their faces serene with concentration. Elizabeth, now working as our program coordinator, waved me into my office. The morning show wants to interview you, she announced, handing me a sticky note with producer details. They're doing a segment on innovative therapy approaches. National or local? I asked, dropping into my chair. National. And that's not all. Elizabeth pulled out her tablet. Remember that article about us in women's health? It went viral. We have a waiting list of 300 people. My hands started shaking. 300? And counting. Violet, you've created something amazing here. You're changing lives. The moment was interrupted by Flynn bursting in. Turn on the news, now! I grabbed the remote for the small office TV, flipping to the business channel. Kingsley's face filled the screen, looking haggard as he pushed through a crowd of reporters. Mr. Campbell, what do you say to allegations that client funds were misappropriated? Is it true the SEC is investigating? How many millions are missing? Elizabeth quietly closed the office door as Flynn sat beside me. You okay? She asked. Before I could answer, my mother called. This time I picked up. Have you seen the news? She demanded. Your brother needs his family right now. Like he was there for me? The words came out sharper than intended. That was different. This could ruin him, Violet. His reputation, his career. Mom. I cut her off, watching Kingsley duck into a waiting car on the TV screen. I have clients waiting. After hanging up, I turned to Elizabeth. Call the producer, set up that interview. Now? Flynn asked. With everything happening with Kingsley? Especially now. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. It's time to show my family what real success looks like. The next week flew by in a blur of preparations. The morning show segment was scheduled to feature both me and Elizabeth, highlighting our program's impact through personal stories. The night before the interview, Caden stopped by the studio. Nervous? He asked, finding me arranging artwork for the camera crew. Terrified. I adjusted a frame. What if I freeze? Just tell them what you told me in that coffee shop, about healing through creativity, about transformation. He picked up one of Elizabeth's early pieces, about hope. While my brother's face is plastered all over the news for destroying people's lives, Caden set down the artwork. You're not responsible for his choices, Violet, just like he wasn't responsible for your success. The next morning, under bright studio lights, I sat across from the morning show host, Elizabeth beside me, our success stories displayed behind us. So, Violet, what inspired you to start this innovative program? I thought about my birthday party, about Kingsley's smirk, about all the doubts and fears. Sometimes, I said, looking directly into the camera, our greatest setbacks become our strongest motivation. I wanted to create a space where people could transform their pain into power, their struggles into strength. And clearly it's working, the host said, gesturing to our display. Your waiting list has grown exponentially since the women's health article. Because people need this, Elizabeth added. They need to know their story isn't over just because someone else tried to write their ending. As Elizabeth shared her journey from client to coordinator, I noticed my phone light up with a text from Flynn. Kingsley's watching. Just saw him retweet the show's live feed. I smiled, sitting a little straighter. Let him watch. Let him see exactly what his little sister had built. This was just the beginning. The day Kingsley's firm collapsed, I was teaching a workshop on resilience through art, irony at its finest. Remember, I told the group, demonstrating brush strokes on canvas. Sometimes the most beautiful pieces come from our biggest mistakes. Flynn burst into the studio, face flushed. You need to see this. On her phone screen, breaking news headlines screamed, Campbell Financial closes doors, CEO steps down amid scandal. The accompanying photo showed Kingsley, my proud, polished brother, being escorted from his building by security. Ladies, please take a short break, I managed to say before following Flynn to my office. Elizabeth was already there, watching the live coverage on the office TV. They're saying hundreds of people lost their retirement savings. Thousands, Caden corrected, appearing in the doorway. I just got off the phone with former colleagues. It's worse than anyone thought. Your brother, he was running a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. My phone started buzzing. First my mother, then unknown numbers as reporters caught wind of my connection to Kingsley. Turn it off, Flynn advised, but I couldn't look away from the TV. The camera zoomed in on Kingsley's face as he pushed through a crowd of angry investors. Gone was the smirk, the perfectly tailored suit, the air of superiority. He looked broken, haunted. I need to see him, I said suddenly. What? Why? Flynn grabbed my arm. After everything he did to you? Because I need to understand. I grabbed my coat. Elizabeth, can you handle the rest of today's sessions? 20 minutes later, I stood outside Kingsley's penthouse apartment. The doorman recognized me, letting me up without question. I found my brother sitting in his dark living room, surrounded by empty whiskey glasses. Come to gloat? His voice was rough, defeated. I flipped on a light. Actually, I came to ask why. Why? He laughed bitterly. Because I could. Because everyone expected brilliance from the golden child. Because once you start, you can't stop. Like you couldn't stop humiliating me at my birthday party? He flinched. I was a bully? An arrogant ass? A fraud? I was scared. He hurled a glass against the wall. Scared that my little sister, the one I always looked down on, was braver than me. You chose your passion over security. I chose other people's money over integrity. I sat down across from him, studying his face. The brother who had tormented me, who had tried to shame me into his version of success, now looked smaller somehow. How many people, Kingsley? 2,417 investors. He rubbed his face. I know the exact number because each one trusted me with their future. My phone buzzed again. Caden sending updates about the scandal's impact. I switched it off. You know what the worst part is? Kingsley continued, staring at his hands. I watched your interview last week. Saw how you're actually helping people, making a real difference, while I was just moving numbers around, creating illusions. Stop. I stood up. I didn't come here for your self-pity. Then why did you come? Because 6 years ago, you tried to destroy me with numbers. You made me feel worthless because I chose art over finance. And now look at us. My art therapy program is transforming lives while your financial empire was built on lies. He looked up, eyes red. Karma's a bitch, isn't it? No, Kingsley. This isn't karma. This is consequence. There's a difference. A pounding on the door interrupted us. Through the peephole, I saw reporters gathering in the hallway. They'll be coming for statements soon, I said, gathering my things. The press, the SEC, angry investors. I know. He stood unsteadily. I'm turning myself in tomorrow. My lawyers say I'm looking at 15 years, minimum. At the door, I paused. Remember when we were kids, and I used to draw on your financial homework? He nodded slowly. You would scream about how I was ruining everything, but Dad would just laugh and say, sometimes we need a little chaos to see things clearly. Maybe it's time you saw things clearly, Kingsley. As I slipped past the reporters, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Please tell me you're not going to abandon your brother like he abandoned you. I typed back, No, Mom, I'm going to do something much worse. I'm going to help him, but this time it'll be on my terms. Back at the studio, I found Flynn waiting. You okay? I looked around at the artwork covering our walls, each piece telling a story of transformation and healing. You know what? I am. I picked up a brush. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from complete breakdown. Speaking from experience? Flynn asked softly. Speaking as someone who learned to turn pain into purpose. I dipped the brush in paint. And now it's Kingsley's turn to learn that lesson. He's been waiting in your office for 20 minutes, Elizabeth whispered, handing me a coffee. Hasn't touched the water I offered him. 2 weeks after Kingsley's firm collapsed, my brother had shown up at my studio, unannounced. Through the office window, I could see him sitting rigidly in the visitor's chair, wearing a wrinkled suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Any press following him? I asked. No, but social media's buzzing about his upcoming court date. Elizabeth checked her phone. The hashtag #RCampbellCrook is trending. I took a deep breath and opened my office door. Kingsley jumped slightly at the sound. You look terrible, I said, sitting behind my desk. Prison will do that. His attempt at a smile failed. I'm out on bail, but the sentencing is next month. My lawyers say, Why are you here, Kingsley? He pulled out a folded newspaper from his jacket. The headline read, Art Therapy, Pioneer Transforms Lives While Brother Faces Prison. They interviewed your clients, he said quietly. The women you've helped, the lives you've changed, even that corporate wellness program is making waves. If you're here to criticize, I'm here to ask for help. The words seemed to physically pain him. Not with the legal stuff. That's done. But with... He gestured vaguely at his chest. This. I leaned back, studying him. You want therapy? I want understanding. Every night I see their faces, the people I betrayed. I can't sleep, can't eat, can't look in the mirror without... He trailed off, hands shaking. A knock interrupted us. Flynn poked her head in. Sorry, but your 11 o'clock is here. The support group for financial trauma survivors. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Kingsley stood up abruptly. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have... Sit down, I commanded, surprising myself with the authority in my voice. Flynn, tell them I'll be there in 15 minutes. After Flynn left, I pulled out my sketch pad. Here's what's going to happen. You want my help? Fine, but we do this my way. What does that mean? I slid the sketch pad across the desk. Draw what you're feeling right now. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. I don't draw. Neither did Elizabeth when she started. Neither did most of my clients. But they learned to express what words couldn't capture. I handed him a charcoal pencil. Draw. For 5 long minutes, Kingsley sat there, pencil hovering over paper. Then, slowly, he began to make marks. Harsh, angry lines at first, then smaller, more uncertain ones. Tell me about it, I said when he finally set down the pencil. It's a cage, he whispered. But I built it myself, bar by bar, lie by lie. I studied the drawing, dark, chaotic, but with a surprising vulnerability in its execution. You know what I see? I see someone who's finally facing their truth. A little late for that, don't you think? It's never too late to start healing. I stood up. But real healing means making amends, Kingsley, not just feeling sorry for yourself. He looked up sharply. What are you suggesting? The support group meeting right now? They're all victims of financial fraud, not your victims, I added quickly, seeing his panic. But people who've been through similar betrayals. I want you to sit in and listen. Don't speak, just listen. That's cruel, Violet. No, what's cruel is destroying people's lives and hiding behind lawyers and PR statements. I moved toward the door. You want my help? Earn it. Show me you're ready to understand the real impact of what you did. To my surprise, he followed me to the group room. As we entered, the conversations hushed. Everyone, this is my brother, I announced. He's here to listen and learn, if you'll permit it. An older woman in the front row studied him. "You're the one from the news, the investment fraud guy." Kingsley nodded, unable to speak. "Good," she said firmly. "Sit down. Listen to what fraud does to real people." For the next hour, Kingsley sat silently as people shared their stories of lost homes, destroyed marriages, shattered dreams. I watched his face crumple with each new testimony. Afterward, he stumbled into my office and collapsed into a chair. "I'll do it," he said hoarsely. "Whatever program you think will help. Whatever it takes." I pulled out a contract I'd prepared, just in case. 3 months of intensive therapy. You'll participate in group sessions, create art, and most importantly, you'll help establish a foundation for fraud victims using whatever assets you have left. His hand shook as he signed. "Why are you helping me?" "Because 6 years ago, you tried to break me by showing everyone my failures. Now I'm going to help you by showing you how to turn failure into redemption." I took the signed contract. "Welcome to rock bottom, brother. Let's see what you can create from here." "You want me to do what?" Kingsley stared at the massive blank canvas I'd set up in the studio's private therapy room. "Paint your guilt," I repeated, laying out brushes and colors. All of it. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment of shame. 2 months into his therapy, my brother had made progress, but he was still holding back. Today was about breaking through that final wall. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, but picked up a brush anyway. His hands were steadier now, the shakes from those first weeks finally subsiding. "I'll be next door if you need me," I said, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the canvas. In my office, Caden waited with news about the victims' foundation we were establishing. "The first round of compensation checks go out next week," he said, spreading documents across my desk. "We've recovered about 40% of the lost investments so far." "Not enough," I sighed. "It's a start. And the therapy program you're developing for financial trauma survivors? That's going to help more people than money ever could." A crash from the therapy room interrupted us. I rushed in to find Kingsley on his knees, surrounded by toppled paint bottles. "I can't," he choked out. "I can't face it." "Yes, you can." I knelt beside him, handing him a fresh brush. "Remember what Elizabeth taught you about color therapy? Start there." Slowly, he stood up. "Red," he whispered, "for the anger, the greed." "Good. Keep going." For the next 3 hours, I watched through the observation window as my brother poured his soul onto canvas. Red became black, became midnight blue, layers of pain and regret building into something raw and real. Flynn appeared with coffee. "How's he doing?" "Look at his brush strokes," I said. "They're different now, less defensive." "Like yours were, after your birthday party?" I nodded, remembering my own journey from humiliation to healing. Elizabeth knocked on the window, gesturing for me to come out. "Your mother's here." I found Andrea in the waiting room, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. "I had to see it for myself," she said. "My son doing art therapy? Would you like to see his work?" She followed me to the observation window. Inside, Kingsley was still painting, tears streaming down his face as he added touches of white to the darkness. "Oh," she breathed. "It's honest," I finished. Maybe for the first time in his life. "I failed you both," she said suddenly. "Pushed him too hard, dismissed your dreams too easily." "Mom." "No, let me finish. I watched your interview last week, the one about transforming trauma into triumph. You were right, about everything." Before I could respond, Kingsley emerged from the therapy room, paint-stained and exhausted. "Mom?" He froze, seeing her. "What are you doing here?" "Looking at my children with new eyes," she said softly. "Both of them." I led them both into my office, where Kingsley's finished painting now hung, a stark representation of his journey from darkness toward light. "The sentencing is tomorrow," he said, staring at his work. "My lawyers say 5 to 7 years with good behavior." "Which you'll get," I said firmly. "Because you're going to continue therapy inside. I've already arranged it with the prison counselor." He turned to me, eyes wet. Why are you doing all this, after what I did to you? Because you were right about one thing at my birthday party. I was drowning. But instead of helping me swim, you tried to push me under. Now I'm teaching you how to swim through your own darkness. The foundation, my mother interjected. I want to help. I have connections, resources. Actually, Caden said from the doorway, we could use support for our new initiative, teaching financial literacy through art therapy. Through art? She looked skeptical. Show her, Kingsley, I encouraged. My brother picked up a marker and moved to the whiteboard. See, Mom? When you visualize toxic investment patterns as red spirals and healthy growth as green branches. I stepped back, watching my family engage with art in a way I'd never thought possible. Flynn appeared beside me. Look at you, she whispered. The black sheep became the shepherd. More like the art therapist became the family therapist, I corrected. Speaking of which, Elizabeth called from reception, your next client's here, another investment banker looking to change careers. I smiled, thinking about my own transformation from shamed artist to respected healer. Send them in. I know exactly where to start. Looking at Kingsley's painting one last time, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. A tiny figure in the corner, holding up a light against the darkness. It looked surprisingly like me. The prison visiting room buzzed with quiet conversations as I set up a small easel across from Kingsley. His orange jumpsuit was a stark contrast to the vibrant paints I'd brought. They're letting you bring art supplies now? He asked, eyeing the guards. I convinced them it's therapeutic. Besides, you've earned some privileges with your work in the prison art program. He smiled slightly. The men in my group asked me to thank you for the new supplies. Thank the foundation. Mom's fundraising efforts have exceeded all expectations. I arranged the brushes. Speaking of which, Elizabeth wanted me to show you something. I pulled out my tablet, showing him photos from our latest exhibition. Art of Recovery, from Financial Trauma to Freedom. Is that... He leaned closer. Your painting, yes. Next to works by fraud survivors. The gallery raised enough money to fund therapy for 50 new clients. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up a brush. Have you seen the latest victim compensation numbers? 87% recovered now, I confirmed. Caden's team has been relentless. Not enough, he said, echoing my words from months ago. No, but this is... I showed him another photo, a group of his former clients in our studio creating art together. They're healing, Kingsley, just like you are. He started painting, his strokes more confident than before. I had a dream last night about your birthday party. Except this time, instead of humiliating you, I was watching myself from the outside. I looked so... small. You were, I said quietly. We both were, in different ways. A guard approached. Miss Campbell, there's someone here to see both of you. Elizabeth walked in, carrying a large portfolio. Sorry to interrupt, but this couldn't wait. She laid out several drawings, artwork from children of fraud victims who'd participated in our family therapy program. They wanted you to see these, she told Kingsley, especially this one. The drawing showed two figures, one in prison orange, one in artist's clothes, connected by a rainbow of colors. Tommy drew that, Elizabeth explained. He said it's about how his dad learned to forgive the man who took their money because of the art therapy program that man's sister created. Kingsley's hand shook so badly he dropped his brush. I picked it up, dipped it in blue, and guided his hand back to the canvas. Keep painting, I instructed. Show me what that means to you. As he worked, I noticed my mother standing by the visiting room window, watching us. She'd become a regular presence at the studio, surprisingly adept at connecting with our corporate donors. The foundation board meeting is next week, she said, joining us. They want both of you to attend. Both of us? Kingsley looked up, confused. Via video link, she clarified. They want to discuss expanding the program nationwide. Apparently, art therapy for white-collar crime survivors is... What did they call it, Violet? Revolutionarily holistic, I quoted, though I prefer necessary healing. Kingsley added final touches to his painting, a bridge spanning darkness and light. I never thought my biggest failure would lead to your greatest success. I corrected. Our success. Your fall forced us all to confront some hard truths about money, about family, about what really matters. Elizabeth's phone buzzed. The documentary crew is here. They're ready to interview you both. Documentary? Kingsley asked. About transformation through art, I explained. From my birthday humiliation to your redemption, and all the lives we've helped in between. Tell them we'll be right there, my mother said. I think we're finally ready to tell our whole story. As Elizabeth left, Kingsley studied his painting. You know what's ironic? I spent years chasing wealth, trying to prove my worth, but I never felt as rich as I do now, helping others heal. That's because true worth isn't in a bank account, I said, beginning to pack up the art supplies. It's in the lives we touch, the changes we inspire. The sisters we underestimate, he added with a sad smile. The brothers we forgive, I countered, squeezing his hand. The guard signaled our time was almost up. My mother helped me gather the supplies while Kingsley cleaned his brushes, a simple act that would have been beneath him just months ago. Ready to share our story? I asked them both. Kingsley looked at his painting one last time, ready to share the truth. All of it, my mother agreed. As we headed toward the documentary crew, I glanced back at Kingsley's canvas. The bridge he'd painted wasn't just spanning darkness and light. It was building something new, something stronger, just like us. Let's show them, I said, how art can heal even the deepest wounds. And together, we walked toward the cameras, ready to transform our family's darkest chapter into a beacon of hope for others.